Welcome to the Starter Girls Podcast, your ultimate source of inspiration and empowerment. We're here to help women succeed in every area of their lives: career, money, relationships, and health and well-being, while celebrating the remarkable journeys of individuals from all walks of life who've achieved amazing things. Whether you're looking to supercharge your career, build financial independence, nurture meaningful relationships, or enhance your overall well-being, the Starter Girls Podcast is here to guide you. Join us as we explore the journeys of those who dare to dream big and achieve greatness. I'm your host, Jennifer Loading, and welcome to this episode. Welcome to another episode of the Starter Girls Podcast. Wherever you are tuning in today, we are so thrilled to have you. I'm your host, Jennifer Loading, and I am so excited about my guest today. I know this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm excited. But let me tell you just a little bit about her before we do all our official welcomes here. So today's guest offers a unique perspective on understanding and managing emotions, combining the sensory experience of culinary arts with emotional education. By viewing emotions through the lens of flavors, she helps people create clarity and purpose around their feelings, making the often complex world of emotions accessible and actionable. She encourages us to recognize that emotions are not simply reactions, but experiences we can change, shape, and understand. So we're going to be welcoming her on in just a few minutes, but before we do that, we do need to do a quick shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Productions. Need to add excitement to your YouTube videos or some expert hands for editing? Look no further. Walt Mills is the solution you've been searching for. Walt is not only your go-to guy for spicing up content, he's the force behind a thriving film production company with numerous titles in the pipeline. Always on the lookout for raw talent, Walt is eager to collaborate on film and internet productions. With a background deeply rooted in entertainment and promotion, Walt Mills leverages years of skills to give you the spotlight you deserve. Want to learn more about Walt and his work? Head on over to waltmillsproductions.net and let your content shine. All right. And with that, I'm ready to bring our guest on today. So please help me welcome Kim Korte as the host of the Flavors of Emotion podcast and author of Yucky Yummy Savory Sweet, Understanding the Flavor of Emotions. Kim introduces a groundbreaking approach to emotional management that blends culinary metaphors with science. With a background as a sensory perception and emotion management strategist, Kim's work helps people recognize that emotions aren't imposed on us, but constructed within us. Much like a chef creates a recipe. Inspired by her own life experiences and the science of how emotions are made, Kim invites us to explore our emotional ingredients, empowering us to respond to life's events with greater awareness and intention. All right, Kim, welcome to the show. I am so excited to chat with you today.
I am too. I mean, pre-show, we had such a great chat, so I can't imagine what this is going to be like. It's going to be amazing. I can feel it.
So much fun. And I love what you're doing, and that's what I want to talk about. I really want to dive into this, what you're doing, how you're helping your clients, and how you got to this place, because emotions are so complex. They can be, but they don't have to be, right? And so I think this is just an area that a lot of people are going to want to hear about. So walk us through this. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, how you're helping your clients, what all this is about.
It's all about seeing emotions for what they are. They're a recreation of our past experiences in the moment, and they aren't necessarily true. They feel true, they feel big, or they feel small, or whatever it is that they feel. They seem so true, but they aren't necessarily. It's a sensory system feelings, and that is what really blew me away. I never ever thought about emotions as a sensory system, but it is. And the more connected we are, just like a chef, if they are connected to their sensory systems, they capture flavors in a dish, right? And because flavor is a combination of multiple sensory systems. And so the same for us, if we can get connected to those feelings and be able to taste them with our emotional palate, it will help us to identify and rework the emotion recipes that we may have been cooking up for many, many years that just don't work. So by using things that are familiar, flavor, ingredients, recipes, I am helping people to look at their emotions in a different light and to see them as just information. And I can change it. Like, I don't have to feel this way if I don't want to, because it's all within me and it's all within my power.
Well, and I think for so long, and maybe that's, kind of shifted more so now, I think we were taught to not really allow many of us. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that were, but I know for me personally, we were taught not to really allow those emotions to show, right? Like to,
Yep.
and there's kind of this stigma that when you have emotional, emotion, is that a weakness or not a weakness kind of thing. But what I'm hearing you say is really about just accepting that as part of this is what it is. And it's funny because we now know that we can't really control emotion. We can control the reaction to the emotion, but we can't really control the emotion, right? Like that is something we feel, but it's in the aftermath what we do with it, right?
Yeah. And so I would like to just take a second and go back to what an emotion is.
Yeah.
And an emotion is a signal that is sent from the brain to the body saying, here, feel this, because we got this input. So if you think about, you're in a situation and you see and hear and smell and all these things are going on around you. This is input that goes into the brain. And it is saying, okay, what do I do with this? And part of that is sending a signal to the body that says, hey, this is what you're feeling. And like I said, it could be true or it could not be true. But emotions are not just those kinds of feelings. It's hunger, it's thirst, it's feeling sick, it's being tired. And when we're really tired and we're displaying tiredness, that's a form of emotion. So what do we do with tiredness? We sleep, we respond, or we question, am I really hungry or am I bored? And it's that understanding that your emotions can be physical, meaning that there's a term for it. It's called a homeostatic emotion, meaning that it's something, an action that you need to take to quell hunger or to get some rest, or is it in response to the situation around you that's making you aware of something that the brain thinks based on your past you need to be aware of. So if you're afraid and don't want to feel, then you might be missing some really key information coming from your body that tells you, hey, you're sick. And it's not until you're really, really sick or really, really hungry or really, really tired that you pay attention. Whereas if you'd paid attention to the smaller feeling, you might not have gotten to that point.
No, I love this. And I think in listening to you, I feel like it's changing the perception of how we look at these feelings, these emotions. Because and thank you for sharing this. I forgot what the word was you used, but you were talking about the hunger and the being. So because those are all feelings, but we don't always think about those when we think about emotion, right? What comes to mind when I start thinking about emotions, I start thinking about sadness, happy, grief, all those words that we come up with, and these are perceptions that we have about those. So I like that. What I'm hearing from you is that you're sort of not desynthesizing them, but saying, hey, look, these are all feelings and emotions that we feel. There is no good or bad with this. This is part of who we are. And we have to learn to navigate those or process them or, whatever we need to do to take that next step. That's what I feel like I'm hearing from you in some way.
Well, and this is why you and I are so connected. This is what I say all the time. Emotions aren't positive or negative, only the outcomes are.
Yeah.
So you can eat poorly and have, or not eat at all and not pay attention to how gross you feel inside of your body from eating bad food. And then, we know what can happen. Disease can come about. So it's the outcomes that are negative. Fear is very positive if you're standing in front of a bear, right? and love can be very detrimental to us if we keep loving the wrong person. So I like to say that perceptions, everything that's going on in our outside and internal world, are our ingredients. Our recipes are our memories or our experiences. It's what happened at some point in time in our life that the brain will use and cook up and deliver to the body. And when it gets delivered to the body, we feel it as a sensation. And so it's our ability to connect to that sensation and then taste it to say, oh, is this right? Just like you could see somebody when you're out in public and you go, oh, there's Joe, and look at Joe. He's with someone that's not Sue, his wife. And then if you didn't look again to make sure it was really Joe, you could think Joe's cheating on Sue. But it's when you look again, you see, oh, wait, that's not Joe. He just looks a lot like Joe. And that's because your brain made a prediction error. And that is my favorite thing to tell people, is because we can mispredict. And that includes what our feelings are. If we see Joe, what we smell, what we taste, everything has the capability of being a misprediction.
I think it's interesting too, because you're talking about these experiences, and I think these really form into our biases and stuff, and then belief systems that we have, which is a lot of the work that I do when I'm working with people to reframe some of those things that, you know, those behaviors that we do that are a result of a belief system that we have. I feel like you and I are doing similar in different ways, but kind of addressing some of the same things. And you're so right about that, is that we can, that particular story you did right there about seeing this guy, you can do that with a lot of different things. You have a bias about things, and the way you see them, you view them, you look at them, and then they create that feeling, that emotion, and then you have the reaction that comes after. And so it's, how do you interrupt that? And I like that you're using the food. I really like this whole metaphor thing with the ingredients and the recipes. I love this. What brought you to, like, how did you get to this place where you realize this is a connection that really works with people?
It worked for me.
Mm.
You know, I mean, aren't we all a product of like, well, what worked for you?
Yes.
And I had, you know, lots and lots and lots of troublesome experiences with my emotions. I learned to push them down. Like you were saying, how people are taught. Well, I learned because it was how I survived. And I had suffered from abuse, sexual abuse as a 5-year-old, which, you know, kind of sets you up poorly for facing emotions. And then, you know, my mom was an alcoholic and loved her to pieces, but that was hard. You know, watching her die at age 59, I had probably came close to losing my job because of my emotions. And I can say, you know, having clients probably, you know, had situations that didn't need to exist because of my emotions. And, you know, it was, I think, a divorce that really sent me, it was like my tipping point that said, okay, you've now just lost a husband and 2 businesses, and, you know, you've got to get a hold of your emotions, because you did something wrong by picking this man to marry. It's like, what was going on? It was my deep dive into myself. And it wasn't until I read this book called How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain that it went like, boom. It was amazing that I began to understand this system. It's called interoception. It's how we feel inside of our bodies. And it's a sensory system. And more importantly, it's an ingredient of our memories. And our memories are what is used to produce our emotions, our thoughts, our decisions, behaviors, everything. So it's usually motion driven. And I'll tell you why, because that is a sensory system. When we think about what our memories are, what's included, who was there, what was going on, maybe, you know, what was you smelled. It just depends on where you focused on based on the event, and then how you felt, because it is a sensory system. So these memories, be they true or false, and like you were saying, reframing, you know, that frame in a camera can be wide lensed or it can be very narrow. And if you have some unsubstantiated fear that made your focus very narrow, then you didn't get potentially enough ingredients to be able to see that situation differently. So while I do use food analogies a lot, focus is a huge, huge, huge part of what I talk about. Because if you can notice when you're feeling a certain way in your body and go, oh, wait, what could I be missing in this situation? Because I'm automatically in this anger state or fear state, which is behind everything is fear or love. In the end, at the core of it is fear or love. And so if we can then take that moment to say, okay, I need to pull back my lens and get more in the frame. And that's the bulk really of what I do in helping readers and listeners and clients alike.
This is so great. There's so many takeaways from this. I wanted to start back with, how you got into the line of work, which you're right. So many of us go into these areas because we're trying to heal parts of us or solve problems or whatever it is that we're dealing with. And much of my work, or I would say probably 99% of the work that I do, everything is started out with something that I was learning for myself. And I realized and recognized that it had a profound effect on me. And then there's got to be other people that could benefit from this same information. But I also want to point out when you mentioned there's not enough ingredients, because I love this, because it takes away you're flawed, you're the problem. It's you didn't have enough information. You didn't have enough, and your lens is narrow. You're basing this on what you saw. And I will use my kids as great examples of this. And because kids all have a different view of the same scenario that happened in a house. And I will say this because I have 3 and they range from 20, and my oldest is 28, one that's going to be 24, and I have a 20-year-old. And they will all tell the same story, but it's a different story. And I don't even remember the story at all. I don't even remember. They'll tell me something that happened. I'll be like, that happened? I don't even know when that was. Apparently it had no profound effect on me, but they all remember it and they all have a different view of it. And so how we see things is our lens. It's the way we see it. And like you said, I love that you said that, it may be true, it may not. That's our perception. And whatever emotion is tied to that, it's tied to it, Right. And so I really love that you're talking about this. We don't have enough ingredients, as you say, it's enough information, to see this and open that up, wider from a lens. And I think this whole thing really, it for me, I feel like, because I feel like that was an area for me for a long time too, was not controlling the emotion, but controlling the behavior that was tied to the emotion. And I think it's interesting. People, they'll say this person is running off of emotion. We're all running off of emotion all the time, whether if you think you don't have emotion, you're lying to yourself. We all have it. It's how we display the reaction to the emotion that is different. And this is a conversation. You're going to laugh at this, Kim, because I always talk about my husband and I. We are complete different personalities. He's a very quiet person, internalizes a lot, a dude a few words. He is extremely, if you want to talk about stoicism, I can't tell when it's the same to me all the time. Me, I'm very passionate. When I'm mad, when I'm happy, when I'm meh, you're going to know, but I always tell him, I'm like, it's in there. I know it's in there. You're just reacting a very different way than I react to your anger and my anger. We both got them. They're just showing up very differently,
Well, displaying of them doesn't mean they exist or don't exist, because they always exist.
Right.
And I always crack up because this is a common statement among men. Oh, I made a very logical decision.
Yes.
This decision is based on logic.
Right.
Well, I don't know how to break this to you, but feeling was behind it.
Yes.
And the reason is because in the end, if you're weighing out 5 different options, 2 different options, it's how you feel about it. And that is why, especially as business leaders, if we are an entrepreneur or have a small, consulting like we do, or if we have staff, your decision making is highly tied to your emotion. So the more connected you are to your emotion, the better decisions you make. But not only that, the more confidence you have in yourself. And I think that self-confidence is not talked about enough. because it really underlies so much of bad decision making. You don't feel good about yourself, and so you make a bad decision.
Right.
And really, so many things we feel and so many things we do are really just a reflection of our inner self, of how we feel about ourselves. So I feel strongly that when we have that confidence in ourselves, who we are, what we want, what we don't want, what we need, what is important, what isn't, all of those things give us that confidence. And there's just one other point I really feel strongly like I need to make, because, I've come to this spot in life because I had a consulting business, and I still do it a little bit. And it's around systems and implementing ERPs or procure to pay systems in the real estate vertical. And, it's a very process oriented thing. So I used to think that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just doing processes. But when I would go in, I'm still mostly paying attention to how people feel. And even today, like, I'm noticing the feeling behind the decision and question the feeling behind it so that I can get to a better process for them. And that's what I'm talking about, it being so important. But the other point I want to talk about is that while we think we experience this world, the world around us, and this goes for your kids, you, me, and everybody listening, while we think that we are experiencing the world as it really is, it all exists in our head, because we don't see with our eyes, we don't hear with our ears, we don't smell with our nose, we don't feel, all of that. It's a prediction of the brain. The brain produces this. And so our inner world is constructed from the time that we're very young, and we don't see well, right, as little babies, and it grows with perceptive input and explanation of what it means. So when you're having an emotion that you are looking at, that you're having difficulty with, it's not the other people who created that, it's you. So you have to look inside to say, what has to happen? What are the ingredients that I need to feel this emotion? And when you go through that exercise, then that's when you remodel that inner. I talk about it in my book, La Sagrada Familia,
Okay.
is this Gaudi. If you've ever heard of Gaudi, it's out of Barcelona. If you do a internet search on this building, it is amazing. And he died before it was finished, and it's still not finished. But it is probably the most beautiful building I've ever been in. And I like to tell people we're like that, this unfinished work of beauty that resides inside of us. And what we want it to look like, how we want our world to be, is truly, truly inside of us.
Well, and I feel like in order for this to happen, we have to keep evolving. We have to keep growing and really
Right.
processing things, because it's so easy to get even think about what you're saying and just patterns of behavior. Like in relationships, think about it, right? Like we have these formed things like ideas, views, thoughts about things, and we get stuck in these patterns of behavior that are a result of an emotion, right? Like that's the action that comes out after. And we'll get stuck in these patterns where we go, well, that's how it's always been. And so we just keep repeating those same cycles, that same feeling, same emotion, same reaction, all those things. But what you're suggesting here is what I really love. And it's really kind of the way I view the world, because I think we're an art project. Like we're just continuing to gather experiences and evolve. And it actually freaks me out, Kim, to just be in a place where I'm not growing. Like it really scares me to just get in a part of my life where I just go, that's it, and just stop and stay stagnant. Like I have to keep evolving and growing, because I want to take in more and I want to learn more and I want to gain more knowledge and even just awareness about myself, right? And I think in that process, that's how we get better, even at how to deal with these, just like taking these pauses and thinking about how are we feeling and how can we change the pattern, how can we behave differently to this particular situation, even if it's always been that way,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I love what you're doing, because I think it's just, it really complements all of my thoughts about how we evolve as human beings and continue to grow and help each other.
Well, if you think about it, we were born to learn. Literally, we were born to learn. And other animals, they don't have to learn how to walk. They don't have to learn colors. They just have experiences. My dogs can learn tricks,
Right.
but there is like a cap on that. I haven't seen anybody who is not impaired have a cap on learning or run out of things to learn. That is what we were born to do. And so if you think about it, your physical palate develops as you get older. When you're younger, you might like the more sweeter stuff. As you get older, your tastes change, your things change. And it would be ridiculous to think that you eat the way you did when you were 5 and you just want mac and cheese all the time. But some people are comfortable staying in that spot and might feel frustrated or a little lonely or empty because they haven't grown and developed their emotional palate like they may have their physical palate and allowed for changes. And so I think when we're like that, because we're afraid, that fear keeps us from growing into the human potential that we've really have. And I think it's limitless up until we die. And then that's when the shift happens. But my point is that I think you feel that way. And I know that I feel that way because I have a hunger and I'm curious, and it's developing that curiosity, which helps us refine and define our emotional palate and consume things that are healthy. It's just like if you had stomach problems your whole life only to find out at whatever age, oh, you're gluten sensitive. You're going to change your diet, right? And you're going to feel better. So it's that fear. It's really about overcoming the fear of feeling. And that's why I use food.
I like it. Okay.
Entrepreneurs, are you ready to level up your leadership skills? Tune in now for an exclusive offer designed just for you.
This is my time.
Did you know 63% of consumers prefer businesses aligned with their values? Recognizing your core values isn't just vital for business growth, it's the bedrock of effective leadership. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or an aspiring creator, identifying your core values is a key step in constructing the framework of a successful leader, enabling you to lead authentically, expand your business, and live life on your terms.
I never settled on play, putting the kettle to flame. I go 100 all day, foot on the pedal, no brakes. 10, 9, paid all my dues, waited in line. 8, 7.
Are you ready to access tools to kickstart your leadership journey? Unlock a treasure trove of insights and get your free resources at www.linktree/JenniferLoading. Take that crucial first step toward realizing your leadership aspirations and elevate your leadership game today.
Ready to shine, brighter than all of the
Overcoming the fear of feeling. And you know what? That is a hard thing for a lot of people feeling. It's a lot because it forces you to go inward. It forces you to deal with things. And it's so interesting because I always, when in my work, everything I do, I always tell people I'm not a Band-Aid person. Like if I sit down and have a conversation with somebody, like I'm going to dig in. And it's because not because I want to, pin somebody in a wall and make them have to do something they're uncomfortable, but it's more to get you to feel, to think, because if you go through life to me and never feel anything, I just can't imagine it. Like I can't imagine not feeling, and I think maybe part of that was, I told somebody this the other day, part of it, I love my parents, are still alive, but I grew up in I'm a Generation Xer. I grew up where kids were taught to be seen and not heard. And, as a child, I always felt like I had one younger sister. We're 5 years apart. And I always felt like she was the favorite child. And I always felt like I could never say anything and nobody wanted to listen to what I had to say, which is maybe or maybe not true, but it is my perception, my reality. It is something that I still today in my 50s sometimes still wrestle with that. Think people don't want to hear what I have to say, or and I have to work on that all the time. But to your point, that is a feeling, that's an emotion tied to those situations that keeps playing out in my head, and I have to continue to address that when it comes up. And so I tell people all the time that when I work with people or when I talk to people, like that's what I want them to do. It's not to make them feel bad about who they are, but it's to give them the opportunity to work through that stuff, because it really allows you, I think, to free yourself in some ways from that and actually shine. And if you think about what we're doing here right now on this podcast, I mean, I have said this so many times on other shows. I've talked about it on my show. I used to get in trouble for talking all the time in school. I was friendly.
Me too.
I got my work done. I got bored. I picked up things quick, get my work done, and I talked to neighbor here, neighbor over there. I got caught. I was always the one that got caught. I think about this all the time, about how when I was a kid, I would sit in my room with my little boombox and my cassette tapes, and I would record myself doing things like teaching lessons or like making shows, or like I was a DJ or whatever. I would do all these little recordings. And then and to think about like what I do now, I'm on a podcast. Like I have got over 300 episodes out. This is what I do all the time, is I'm always talking. And if I had taken all the emotion that was tied to those experiences that I had and not allowed myself to work through that and feel that and process that, you see what I'm saying? So I think that it's good for us to continue to address those things and learn from them and keep evolving and get the ingredients that we need to expand our view.
Yeah. So can I share something that I do?
Yeah.
To help people?
Absolutely.
Because we have to understand that our comfort level with feelings and someone else's, it's could be drastically different.
Absolutely.
And so in my book, I even have this, I call it the emotion chef progression, because we're all different. And at our core, we ate a meal at some point, right? Like we've eaten today.
Right.
So what did we eat? What was in it? How did it taste? What did it feel like before you ate? Like, did you notice, like, how hungry were you? Were you a little hungry? Were you just kind of like, oh, I need to eat just to eat? How did it feel afterwards? Did you notice any particular flavors? Like bringing up awareness about food. I mean, we're talking about something that you do every day that involves multiple sensory systems, and it creates a emotional experience. When I say emotional, because you have feelings about what you eat. How did you like it? Did you love it? Was it too salty? Was it too sugary? Like what was in it? Did you notice, whatever, I can't think of off the top of my head. If I were just to go with my breakfast this morning, my eggs were overcooked. I like them more runny. I have gluten-free bread. I'm never going to buy it again. It was a little over toasted. I don't like the hard crust on the outside. Like, go in and describe it, and that what I liked, what I didn't like, and how it felt. Just that simple is a feeling. And it's getting you used to connecting to the body, connecting to what's going on inside of you. And that little simple step was connecting to a feeling.
Good. It's good. The only reason I'm smiling at you is because I do low carb. And so right before I got on here, I was hungry. I was like, I got to eat before I get on here with Kim, because it's almost lunch and I need food. And I didn't have a lot of time. And I was also lazy. So I went in the freezer and I pulled out a frozen hamburger patty. I threw it on a pan. My son came in and flipped it, and I placed mustard all over it, and then I ate it. And I'm like, it just kind of sucked because I overcooked the burger patty and there was like nothing on it but mustard. Seriously. So, but to your point about the whole food thing, this is so true. We create emotions, and that's why we have issues with food sometimes. Like, okay, so when I was growing up, we ate out like a lot because we were like the kids that both my mom and dad worked, and we were in 100 activities. Okay, not really 100, but a lot of activities. And so we ate out a lot. And when I first married my husband, his family are ranchers in Montana. They didn't have the luxury of eating out all the time because they lived on a ranch, and the nearest town was at least 2 hours away before we were going to get anywhere where there was like maybe a McDonald's or something, right? And so when we first got together, like, I always wanted to eat out because like that's what we did. It was fun. And I always thought, eating out, to me, I associated eating out. My parents, everybody got along because we couldn't fight. We were in a restaurant and it was fun. And we did it on birthdays and graduations and every holiday, right? But he didn't like to do that because that's not really what they did to do. Now we don't eat out anything like that because now it's more of a pain for me. But there is the emotion that is tied to the experience of going out to eat. And so I love that you're using this food as kind of a way for us to sit down and like get awareness about how we feel about what we're eating and how we felt before and after and all of those. Because if your only association was every time we went out to eat, that was like for something special, it becomes now like, even to this day, I'll be like, I want to go out to eat. And you know why I want to go out? It's not because the food is better, because I can eat way better at home for how I do food, because I do low carb and carnivore. Then I could probably get going out there. It's actually a pain for me now because I have to tell them, I don't want the bun on the burger. I don't want the tortillas. Can you just bring me a plate of meat and throw a couple veggies on the side? It's a lot of work. But I had to change that. I had to get new ingredients, and I had to change that perception and make it look different. And even like planning meals out, like, I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up eating 5-course meal. We had the meat, the potato, the veggie, the bread, the dessert, and then soda pop on the table. Now you'll laugh at me. My meal sometimes is the hamburger patty with the mustard. I eat like that a lot. Like, it's meat a lot of times, just meat on a plate. Like, I had to change the whole emotion that was tied to that plate of food so I can progress and eat the way I want to eat. So I love this. I'm totally with you on the whole food thing. It's powerful.
Good. And I do want to say one thing is that, you talked about eating and maybe people with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And so because of what happened to me when I was 5, I had developed an eating disorder.
Oh, wow.
And I had bulimia, and I would have this overwhelming need to get rid of the food. And it would feel very, very strong. And now looking back on it, like, I can see, the connection of what I was, how I was looking at the food versus how I was looking at the feelings that I needed to let go of. And there's obviously a lot more complexity to it, but it's food is very healthy for us. And so I might not have the right book for someone who has an eating disorder. They might find it hard for them to work, and you should be working with a professional. And I just want to say that out loud in case there's someone who's listening. Definitely work with somebody to help you. And, listen if you feel uncomfortable reading, unless you can look at it with curiosity. I just thought I should say that out
I think
loud.
That's great. And I love that you said curiosity, because I think it gets back to what we were talking about, being open to add more ingredients to your palate and to get more information and knowledge so that you can look at things from, view things from fresh perspective, fresh eyes, so to speak.
Think about like your brain as this kitchen housing just trillions of recipes, the recipes that we use to identify a man versus a woman, the recipes that we use to identify colors, but more importantly, how we feel about all of that. And the more we give our brain, the more recipes we have, the more distinction it can give us in our emotions. So if we've, go to fear all the time, delineate that. You don't have, every sweet dish doesn't taste the same. They're all different. And so that's what we have to do with love. And every spicy hot dish, you can have a spicy pepper and a non-spicy pepper. Being able to recognize that. And that's by giving your brain more recipes. That's why this is a lifelong project to identify, learn, refine, or throw out the recipes that just don't serve us.
I want to ask you kind of a personal question. I feel like these are my
Absolutely.
two personal ones that I think you're going to really like. I want to know for you, like, what is it about this work that you love? I can feel your passion. Like, I can feel the energy like coming through the screen right now. And I know I can tell you love what you're doing, and it's coming from a heart place. It's coming from a deep
It is.
passion to help people really be healed. And I love that. But I want to hear from you what it is about this work that it really draws you to this.
I'll be honest with you, I can't not do it. I've been working on this for 10 years. It's certainly, at this point in time, I know it will be, highly profitable, but I used to make bank as a consultant, and I feel so strongly about this. It's like I was born to do this. It's like I've just come into right now what I am meant to do. And like I said, I have tried to not do it. You can ask my husband, you can ask my family, you can ask all my friends. Like, I tried, and it's impossible, because I want people to feel like I feel right now. Like, I'm not afraid of my feelings. I'm not the girl who was just walking, with my sister-in-law crying, and I didn't understand why, and just feeling feelings that I don't always understand everything about them all the time, but I have the skills down to be able to go back. In fact, I was having this conversation because I was like saying to someone, there is no such thing to me as emotional mastery. There's so many things that make us complex, but I think that there's an emotion chef master, meaning we have competency in our ability to examine, to feel, to connect to the feeling, and to, be able to pivot from situations, to do some self-examination. And you would think it takes a lot of time, but it actually ends up not. It becomes like a habit.
Right.
Just like a chef has a habit. They don't have to think about every recipe or what they might want to add or what they don't want to add. It just becomes part of who you are. And so, that feeling that I have is pretty flippin' amazing. And I want others to feel that way too, to go from a really dark emotional place to a very bright one. And I fostered my curiosity all the time.
Well, and I think too, from listening to you, and I don't know if this rings for you, but I think it's an okayness with yourself that you can feel those emotions, because I think, and I may have shared this with you, Jamie Kern Lima, her book Worthy, I read it, and it's a really good book. And one of the things, like the first chapter in the very beginning, I can't tell you the whole book because I read it a while back, but it is a good book. Every woman should read it. It is an incredible book. But in the very beginning, she talks about the difference between confidence and worthiness. And I never really looked at it this way, because I always thought the two were tied together, that as we build the confidence, that builds the worthiness. And maybe it will, but it doesn't always do that. Meaning we could become competent at a skill, right? But that doesn't necessarily think we make us feel worthy. And I think that worthiness, I don't know the magical formula. I think, like we're talking here, it's a continual process, right? To get to that place where what I'm hearing you say, and I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I can feel what you're saying because I'm in that place. It's where you are okay feeling your emotion because it doesn't make you a bad person because you have it. You can get up and go. And this is how I view a lot of things in life. When I do something, I don't know 100% if it's going to be a bust or not, but I'm willing to try if I want to do it bad enough. And I'm okay if it fails, because I don't think that makes me a bad person because I didn't do well at it. And I think that's how I look at the emotion too, is that when I feel angry about something or upset about something, I want to do what you're talking. I want to, however we are doing this, I want to look at the ingredients and say, do I need more information? I want to pause for a minute and say, how am I going to respond to this? Am I basing this on a previous situation? Can I take in some new information, right? And look at that. But at the same time, with all of that, I want to say I'm okay going through that process. That doesn't make me a bad person because I feel that way. And I think that's what I'm hearing when I hear this. from you is really just about processing that and saying, it's okay that I feel this way. It's okay that I'm in that moment. I'm having that. My choice now is to decide what I'm going to do with it. Like, how am I going to go forward now that I feel this way? Am I going to let it consume me and bring me, and go in a negative way? Or am I going to try to go do something positive with it? And I think that's what your work is doing. That is what you're doing with your work, is taking all those experiences and things that made you feel bad and using them in a fabulous way to heal yourself and help others in the process.
Yeah. And when you say bad person, that I like to kind of remove that from the equation. Yeah. And the reason why is because somehow we always want people to feel like we feel,
right,
to believe like we believe. And we can see that right now, right, in the United States. It's like we have no tolerance for, I'm not going to say we have no tolerance, but there is a seeming lack of tolerance for other people's beliefs.
Right.
And to me, that's a lack of certain amount of compassion or empathy. But worthiness and self-confidence are tied but different in my mind. Yeah. And I would need to look up the definitions of the words just for sure, because that's what I also do. I use word hippo all the time. Yeah. And so for me, self-confidence means like, okay, I feel good about my ability to do this. Worthiness to me is how I feel is how I feel. And that's how I feel. I'm willing to look at it and examine it. But if I don't feel unworthy just because we don't feel the same.
Right.
Like I don't need your approval to feel how I feel. Like I'm not worthy of whatever because I don't feel like how you feel, or I don't believe how you believe. I'm competent. I feel good about who I am. And so to me, that's that lacing of self-confidence with worthiness, because
together they're it's a nuance. Yeah.
It is
just a nuance between them. But my point to that whole conversation, Kim, was just to tell you, I never thought of them independently. I never thought of them. I thought of them as being the same. And the reason I'm telling you this is because if you're an achievement oriented person, let's take another look at this. For somebody like me, I am highly achievement oriented. That's how I, as a child, I learned very early on that when I did good things, I got praised, and that's what I wanted. And so as an adult, that carried with me for a very, very long time. I felt like I needed to check things off. And the more I do, the smarter I get, the more people would like me, that kind of thing. And I really had to learn that difference between that small nuance between the confidence and the worthiness, because now I know that I don't have to do those things. I do them because I want to do them. And so every time I take on something, I go back and I can look at that, because we're talking emotion, right? This is an emotion that comes up. I can go and I can say, am I doing this because I feel the need to do this to prove? Or am I doing this because it's something that I really value? I want to learn it for me. And I think that this will be something I can value and make for somebody else. Completely different feeling.
I love it. That's emotional granularity. And I always say, if you take anger and it's a rock and you wanted to break it down into its little pieces, that's heavy, right? And yet a lot of people have anger all the time. But when you break it down, you might be irked. We have all of these words in our dictionary for a reason. There's a difference between irritated, irked, miffed, dissatisfied. Like there's little nuances that a lot of us miss because we don't give our brain the definition for it. We don't say, oh, in this situation, I'm not angry. I'm really just a little bit irritated, or pick your word. And so that your brain can start to use that feeling. So you imagine, because your brain doesn't care. Your brain has no idea whether you're experiencing it or if you are giving it the information. Obviously, the experience plays a much heavier weight because it's getting that sensory input. But we can reimagine the situation and say, no, I'm not angry. I'm really irritated with them or disappointed in what the outcome was. And what that does is it adds another recipe so that the brain, and the more that we do that and use it, there's a phrase, it says neurons that wire together fire together. And so we're teaching these neurons this recipe. And so they start to build this like, oh, we're doing this more and more and more. So let's use this recipe too. And so if you give your brain more, it's like having an Italian cookbook with 100 recipes versus an Italian cookbook with 1,000. A lot of similar ingredients in Italian food. And yet there's 1,000, and I'm sure there's more than 1,000 recipes.
So good, Kim. So good. Well, this has been such an awesome conversation. Like I said, I love what you're doing. I know people are going to want to find you and figure out where to hear the podcast and pick up your book and all these good things. So where do we want to send them?
To kimkorte.com. Everything's there. And I'm building a community. I'm just going to be launching it in the next couple of months, and it's going to have courses. I'm starting to offer workshops, and you can, I'm just in my head, like while we were talking, I was like, I need to do a workshop with this lady.
What happens to me all the time on the show. I get to brainstorm and I start thinking how I got to connect people. I got to talk to this person some more. I'm in the middle of building out a course too. And it's on mine is on overcoming subconscious blocks, and it's tied to the business side because I've got my Starter Girls brand and then Jennifer Loading. They kind of overlap, but they're two brands. And so I'm excited about what you're doing. You've got a lot of cool stuff going on there, and it's fun. And I think that, I love your passion for what you're doing and your energy, and even your quest to just continuing to keep learning and creating things, because I think it just keeps our brain moving all the time, which is such a good thing.
And it's also good to keep us from getting dementia, right?
Amen. I'm with you on that. We'll make sure, Kim, when this goes out, we'll get your website in there in the show notes so they know where to find you and all that good stuff. And then we'll get you tagged in all the places as well. So I want to tell you, thank you so much for all the great conversation and all of your wisdom and knowledge and all the good tidbits and the recipe talk and all of it. I love it.
Are you hungry now? You need to go get another burger?
My gross burger patty's still sitting in there right now, but I might be. I want to check your book out. Like I want to get your book because I'm excited. It just looks fun to me. The title looks fun. I love it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's kind of an homage to another real cookbook, a book that's based on cooking and flavors. So, of course, I can't think of the title of it. We have it in our library of cooking stuff because, of course, I'm married to somebody who's into food too. He's a sommelier.
How fun is it? And I'm going to ask you one fun question because now you made me think about. I want to know what your guilty pleasure food is for you. What is it that you love? All this food talk, now we got to talk about it.
It used to be, I used to call it wedding cake. Like when I was a little kid, I just loved wedding cake. But I guess my biggest guilty pleasure would be like a cream sauce pasta. My husband makes this mushroom pasta and it's made with cream, and he'll do it with gluten-free. And oh my goodness, it is my favorite. And we never eat it in the summertime because, of course, he can't make it in the summertime. He's like, this is a winter dish.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Yes.
It's so good. In fact, I've been telling him lately, I go, it's starting to get cold. Although here in California, Northern California, it's going to be 75 today. But we are heading into the colder days. So hopefully he'll cook me up a few batches of that.
Awesome. I had to ask you that question because I do that every now and then. I'll ask somebody that question. I'm like, we've been talking a lot about recipes today. We would be like silly if I did not ask that question today about the food. And it's always funny. It's a funny question because, like I had one the other day, we were talking. I'm like, if somebody asked me that now, because I do low carb because I have a condition and I just feel better if I stay on it. It's not a diet thing for me. It's not because I want to lose weight. It is strictly because of my health and I just feel better and I have less problems with my condition. But it was funny because I told her the other day, I said, if somebody asked me that question, I'm like, Well, like my guilty pleasure now would probably be like yogurt and pecans. I really love vanilla yogurt with pecans and a little bit of like Celtic salt. But every now and then I want ice cream. So I will get
Yes, well,
some of the
ice
low
cream.
carb ice cream. And you're not, I no kidding. So one of the grocery stores here has this brand called Rebel. I got one the other day. It was peanut butter, caramel, chip. Oh my gosh. It
Oh
was
my
like
gosh.
Butterfinger. It was so, I've not had a Butterfinger since I was in my 20s. And I swear it tastes like Butterfinger. Like usually I'll buy a small little pint of it and it'll last me all week. I ate it in like 24 hours. It's like gone. It was so good.
Ice cream is a huge guilty pleasure, and especially if it has something in it that has gluten, because we have this thing where my husband, because I'm sensitive, I don't have
Right. Okay.
the problem.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name.
The celiac.
But I'm definitely very celiac. Yeah, I'm definitely very sensitive. I will swell from nose to knees.
Yeah.
And it takes several days. And the older I'm getting, the longer it takes to get out of my system.
Right.
But there's a Ben and Jerry's Tonight Dough ice cream. That is so good. And that's a huge indulgence because it's terribly bad for you, and it's got gluten, but it's so
you
good.
gotta wage war on that stuff. I'm with you on that, because that's why I say it's just not worth it to me most of the time. But that particular is a low carb, so it doesn't seem to bother me too much.
That's good.
If I eat it. But yeah, I'm like that with a lot of things. I'll be like, I want a piece of that cake, and then I'm like, but I'm gonna taste that good bite, and then tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna be hurting, and I'm gonna be like, that was not worth it. So I'm with you on that. Well, this has been fun, Kim. I so appreciate your time. And like I said, all your wisdom and your knowledge. We're going to get this. I'm excited to get this out and let people hear it. I think it's going to be a great episode. I do want to say to our audience, we hope you found this episode informing and inspiring and all the things. You can follow us, hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share, do all the things. Help us keep sharing all these fabulous stories and content. And as I always say, in order to live the extraordinary, you must start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another, and we will see you next time.